Welcome everyone. This is not so much a progress report as a list of excuses for limited progress. However, some of the excuses are interesting ones for any classic car enthusiasts. Firstly, to get the boring excuses out of the way, late spring was a busy period for work and was also hampered by endless rainy days, plus a few migraines. Much more interesting was the final preparation of Leo's ACs for the National AC Day in late May. Finishing the primrose-coloured Buckland became a race against time. That was partly because we were waiting for some dry days, but then gave up and worked in the rain. On my final visit, Leo held an umbrella while I fixed some electrical gremlins, but we got it all resolved. Leo also brought out a familiar gold saloon from storage. You might recall being taken for a ride back in 2022. This AC was due to be collected by its new owner after the AC event. Leo worked his magic on the triple SU carbs and had it running very sweetly.
Got it going? Yep. Without the air filters on. Yep. Might need slighted. Lovely, isn't it? Wow.
I produced a full-length video of the National AC Day and its final preparations. It was my first attendance for a few years, and there is one thing that still impresses me. With such a rare make of car and small club, we see an amazing variety of cars. From luxury saloons to GT racers, from 1920s vintage to modern classics. At classic car events I like to choose a car that I would like to take home if that opportunity was given to me. It's a tough choice, but I'll make it a car that I could live with. I'd probably choose the maroon Buckland. Not only is it immaculate, but the smoothly running engine suggests that it is in fine fettle under the skin too. The Frua 428 with its manual gearbox would also be tempting. It is reputed to achieve 0 to 60 in 5.4 seconds and a starting quarter mile in 13.8. That's pretty quick for a luxury Grand Tourer. Undoubtedly the star of the show was the unique A98 AC Cobra Le Mans Coupe. There was one other welcome diversion from AC work, but I'll save that to the end of this video. Okay, back to my AC and more delays. In a previous report I gave the good news that the crankshaft had arrived after a 27-month wait. Since then there's been a problem obtaining the rest of the engine parts. I won't try to explain, but I will update you later of any progress. The electroplating project was also suffering a setback. The plating tank seemed to be contaminated. This was a serious setback because it takes many hours of sanding, polishing and cleaning each item before plating, only to have it ruined in the tank. The plating kit supplier Gateros was very helpful, and at no time did they try to sell anything more. However, I took the decision to buy new chemicals and start from scratch. I have plenty of plating to do and can't waste any more time. I suspect that the spare mascot I tried to plate might be the cause of the contamination. It is hollow and narrow, and so it's hard to clean the inside. It's also a bit too long for the tank, so I'll leave that part to the professionals. I also bought the small version of Gateros copper plating kit to deal with pitted steel or mazak parts. Copper is used as an intermediate layer to smooth out the pits. I set to work replating the steel fittings on the adjustable steering column. Decided to leave the slightly pitted surface, which is not all that noticeable in normal use. In fact, the sparkle on that spring cover looks rather nice. I polished up the aluminium parts. One small piece of good news, I found the third and final carburettor body on eBay that I needed to upgrade from 1 1/8 to 1 1/4 inches. Now to the final reason for delays. A new addition to the fleet arrived in June 2024. I needed an estate car to help complete work on the AC, transporting AC parts to and from specialists or collecting spare parts. Any level-headed motorist seeking a modern runabout estate would buy a Reliant Scimitar. The fact that it looks good, sounds great and is fun to drive was only a minor influence on my choice. Imagine how long it took to find a Scimitar that matched my garage doors. The paintwork is not perfect, but I don't want a show car. It makes financial sense as it will probably appreciate in value, gets free road tax, it is MOT and ULEZ exempt. It's old enough for me to maintain myself. There is a major Scimitar specialist only 22 miles away where I get my spare parts. I didn't want a potential rust bucket, so fiberglass is ideal. Reliant were specialists in fiberglass, so the build quality is very high. Like the AC 2 litre, it's an undervalued car that is appreciated by those that know them. My first priority was to do preventative maintenance and fix some minor issues. Pumping up the tyres was a good start. Also check that the wheel nuts are not seized. 2 of the 4 headlight main beams had failed, but that was an easy fix with a broken lead. I bought a few safety accessories. The screen washer and rear washer had failed. New pumps were included in a box of spares with the car. The pumps are held into the tank with plastic nuts inside that you have to try and hold still. The old tubing had gone rock hard, causing it to fall off connectors. I bought new tubing, but failed to get it to slide into the body side. Fortunately, I'd got the tubing from the Scimitar specialists, Queen's Road Garage, and it was a larger bore than the original, so I pushed it over the ends of the old tubes and made short link extensions. The suspension earth strap was broken. That affects the brake pad warning lamp. And I rewired the automatic underbonnet light. Some rear lamp covers were cracked, but replacements were provided in the box of spares. The rear interior lamp wasn't working. Inside the cover was a pile of green dust, a festoon bulb corroded through, and in the lamp unit a contact had disintegrated. It was as though it had filled up with water. When I pulled through the cable from the roof duct, water came out. I wonder how that got there. On one of my first short drives it started running on 5 cylinders. The spark plug lead had been pulled off by the steering column. Some of the leads should be clipped to the rocker cover. The pedals are offset to the right and there's barely enough width for my foot on the accelerator. This was partly due to very thick new carpets, so I cut a section out from the side and stuck in some vinyl leather cloth bought for the AC. An irritating tapping noise from the engine was from a fairly obvious source. Removing and installing the right-hand rocker cover was quite a challenge because of access to some bolts. I might make a modified box spanner or socket to save time in the future. A few small electrical issues were fixed very easily. The most interesting was that the temperature gauge was reading too high. The petrol gauge was also inaccurate. These both run on 10 volts courtesy of a voltage stabilizer. This is an old tech device with a contact breaker, including a bimetallic contact and a heating coil. I fitted a new one and also improved a bad earth on the dashboard, and the fuel gauge promptly dropped from about 60% full to 35% full. The temperature gauge still read too high, although the car's service history showed a new sender unit fitted 3 years ago. The Scimitar forum reveals this as a common issue, and someone suggested the sender units for Ford Granadas were being passed off as ones for Scimitars. Same engine but different gauge. Since the previous new sender came from Queens Road Garage, I found an eBay seller with a range of brands to choose from. Guess what? It's still reading too high. There has only been one more taxing issue, and that is engine performance. But the delay in putting it right has been caused by the challenge of finding any information. This Reliant came with a pile of workshop manuals for the earlier version with the Ford Essex V6 engine. My car dates from 1982 and has the Ford Cologne V6. I found an owner's handbook on eBay. I wanted to check the carburettor, but this handbook said due to European emission laws, the carb had tamper-proof seals on it, and we're not going to tell you how to adjust it, so there. The tamper-proof seals were long gone, as this carb had been overhauled 18 months earlier. The car had not been used much recently, so I suspected either carb or fuel line trouble. I then found a Haynes overhaul manual on Solex Pierberg carburettors 1978 to 92, but it did not include my carburettor. What do I have to do to get any help? Many thanks to my motoring friends, Chris, Ian, Leo, Paul, Tom and Tony for their help. Tom sent me diagrams of this type of Pierberg carb and translated the labels into English from German. Now I know roughly how it works. I was already familiar with old Solex carbs. I know it is good practice to check ignition and everything else before pulling apart a carb. I wanted to check everything over anyway. There were recently renewed plugs and leads. The distributor cap looked new. I tested the vacuum advance. I used a wood glue syringe as a vacuum pump. The advance was stiff at first. I discovered that the hose connected to the vacuum advance is supposed to go to the air filter. The filter has a vacuum controlled flap to switch between warm or cool air. The correct hose was hanging loose from the carb. This is a ported vacuum connection rather than direct from the manifold. I'm not a fan of that approach, which was one of those unhappy compromises for emissions regulations, but I'll leave the car in unmodified form at least until everything is working correctly. The distributor is electronic from new. As a precaution, I decided to renew all the fuel hoses with the best Coline fully ethanol resistant items. There are no less than 7 hoses. There is a feed and return to the tank. In the engine bay there is, what I assume, is a vapour separator between the mechanical pump and the carburettor. At the fuel tank end I discovered that there is an inline filter. As this region is difficult to access, the rear hoses and filter are almost certainly the originals. When I removed the rear feed hose from the tank, black sludge came out. The ancient filter was almost packed solid with sludge. No wonder the engine seemed short of power at times. I made a point of disconnecting the rear feed hose at the tank before releasing any other hoses. That was to stop fuel from siphoning out. I wasn't impressed with the design of the fuel feed system, including hose connections near the engine at the lowest point in the system. If you ever suffer a fuel leak, you can remove the left rear wheel and clamp the rear hose. I always carry small clamps among my emergency tools with the car. Next I opened up the mechanical pump to clean the filter. There was no filter. Apparently a later version, as I think the rear inline filter was a later addition, so they probably omitted the pump filter. Next, a quick check inside the carburettor and see if there is any dirt, and also check the float level. Apart from some dirty fuel, all looked well, except that the relatively new paper gasket was stretched lengthways so that it did not line up correctly. The new gasket I bought is solid fibre, but I noticed a few small holes were not fully punched out. It's always worth checking all new components. When I searched forums for help on the Pierberg carb, I saw that many folks say it's not worth trying to fix. We should all throw them away and upgrade to a Weber. That sounded a bit defeatist. I was delighted to find a Dutch gent at a Ford Granada forum state that we Brits are all wrong. He overhauls Pierbergs and claims that if you maintain them, as with any carbs, they are better than Webers. I vibe with his approach, although it's too soon to say which view I will agree with. As mine is recently overhauled, it should be okay for now. A really useful supplier here in the UK is a company called Car Builder Solutions. They supply a huge range of parts for kit car builders, but I bought things from them when adding extra lights and accessories to the AC. I bought my new fuel hoses there for the Reliant, among many other small items. After seeing how dim the brake lights and the indicators look, I carried out the same LED upgrade that I did for the AC, excluding headlamps and fog lamps. I know purists disapprove of this lack of originality, but if someone crashes into your pride and joy because they did not see your lights, then the car will end up a lot less original. We're not driving in 1982 or 1949 anymore. The doors feature puddle lights to illuminate the ground. The steel lamp sockets were rusty, with one bulb fused in, having part melted the lens. It still worked somehow. New sockets are on order. I renewed the wiper motor strap and pad. I did a quick check of the ignition timing, which should be 9 degrees before top dead centre at 900 RPM. I applied white paint to the 9 degree mark and timing marks on the pulley. To adjust the distributor, you need a special tool to undo the clamp. Next on the agenda, some new ignition parts. As mentioned, the screen washer bottle had a history of leaking out its contents. It appears the fluid submerged a mysterious aluminium box which was severely corroded to the point of disintegrating. And what is this mystery box? It's the electronic control for the ignition. Amazingly, it still worked, but as a precaution I bought a new one, and for good measure also new ignition loom and a new coil. The box is in an awkward location, and as one removes one damaged part, one inevitably unearths more damaged parts. As an old hand with the AC resto, this is like a normal day at the office for me. A steel shield for the box had rusted and its securing rivet broken. After shoveling out a mountain of white and blue powder, I cleaned everything up and renewed one of the two earthing straps. Once the new box was in place, I tested the new coil. Primary coil resistance measured 1.3 ohms, which equals the old one. Secondary coil reading was 10.11 kiloohms, much higher than the old coil at 8.5. I was glad I checked over the new loom. One of the rubber booted connectors had a layer of rubber inside the terminal. I pulled it out with tweezers. All three connectors for the coil were far tighter than the old ones and difficult to push on. I much prefer the screw-on terminals on the AC, as you know when they are on properly. Now for the final setback, just as I thought I'd almost finished. A special 3-pin connector for the distributor was missing from my car. I think these are unique to old Ford engines and are no longer available. Next setback was the little 4-pin connector to the main loom. These can be assembled in a choice of 2 ways, so it's a 50-50 chance that my new loom would match up. It didn't. Possibly a blessing in disguise though, as the old connector is corroded. One last issue with the engine was poor pickup, as though the accelerator pump wasn't working. An anti-stall device also feeds via the same jets. I took out the pair of jets, tried blowing air through, and then blasted them with carb cleaner. Now it works well. The air filter gasket was missing and new ones are out of stock, so I made a new one from rubber. I'll get a proper one when available. A quick test drive showed a complete transformation, like a rocket sled by comparison. Or if my insurers are watching, a nice sedate old car. More precisely, nice and flexible at low revs, and curiously much stronger engine braking. I bought an exhaust CO meter, which I'd planned to get for the AC anyway. The Scimitar manual says that the carb idle mixture should be set up by measuring the carbon monoxide emissions. The specs stated 1.5%. I initially measured over 9%. 3 complete turns of the idle mixture screws brought this down to 3.0%. Another full turn got it down to 1.5%. A last minute update on the temperature gauge. Thank you to whoever posted on the Scimitar forum an easy fix. I added a 33 ohm resistor with a generous 10 watt power rating in series with the sender unit. I mounted it in a cool area. After a short run to warm up, the fan came on, which should be at 85 degrees C. Success! For those of you who have made it to the end, I'll finish with a brief startup from cold, recorded with my ultra hi-fi audio. You'll see me blip the throttle to disengage the auto choke. Thanks for watching and see you next time.